What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with my hands-on and first impressions video of the T-Mobile Revvl 7 5G. So without further ado, let's get started. Now I'd like to thank T-Mobile for being kind enough for sending out the Revvl 7 5G to me. Now, I'm very excited about this device because I've covered pretty much all the other previous Revvl devices that have been out over the last several years. And in general, this series is evolving always for the better with every generation, and it definitely looks like with the Revvl 7 5G, this phone does continue that trend. Now, this phone is one of two devices that have launched in this series. There's also the Revvl 7 Pro 5G, and I will be comparing this device and that device in a separate video, so definitely stay tuned for that content. Now, before we get too far into things here with the phone itself, let's see what all comes included in the box. So here's the box right there. You can see the name of the phone on the side. And then we are getting a SIM card removal tool. We're also getting a USB-C to USB-A cable. And then finally, we are getting some literature included here. But unfortunately, there is no USB wall adapter included, so you will have to provide that on your own. Now, the T-Mobile Revvl 7 5G is a very unique device in the sense that this phone is actually very affordable, yet we are getting a lot of surprisingly premium features here with the phone. So the first thing is, this phone actually features an MSRP of $199, and since it is a T-Mobile Revvl device, it is exclusive to both T-Mobile and Metro by T-Mobile. Now, each of those are offering their own various deals and promotions and discounts, but I know, for example, at Metro by T-Mobile, you can get this phone for free if you port in from another carrier, and then it's also free if you create a new line. So I have a feeling that most people will not be paying the full price for this device, just because T-Mobile does tend to pair it up with quite a few discounts. Now with the Revvl 7 5G, we're getting a very large 6.58-inch display. Now this display is PLS LCD, and it is actually 1080p, which is nice. And then we are getting a PPI of 401. Now, definitely compared to the 7 Pro, which I'll be showing you again in a later video, the display here is not nearly as good. Of course, we are also getting the notch up top here, which does feature the 8-megapixel front-facing camera. But in general, I wouldn't say this display is really too good at all. Viewing angles certainly are not great. You really have to look at it straight on. But again, for a phone in this segment, and for a phone meant to be very low end, everything is honestly very adequate here. But despite some disappointing things with the display, there are certainly some very good things as well. You can see here that the phone does feature a 120Hz refresh rate, which you can actually turn off if you want. So if you switch it to 60Hz, things just won't run nearly as smoothly here. But if you do switch it to 120, things are then very smooth. So that's typically a feature you don't find with phones in this segment. So I'm really glad that we are getting it because I do like having that faster refresh rate. And then with this device, we are getting 128GB of internal storage, along with microSD card expansion. So honestly, for a phone that is this low end, having 128 gigs is actually very generous. I do think for most people that's kind of the bare minimum, especially with how apps seem to be getting bigger and bigger. I know a lot of people like to watch video content when they're on the plane, for example, so they like to download that content in advance. And you're really going to need a lot of internal space for that. So I feel like 64 gigs really is not adequate. And it is cool to see that even on the low end now, we are getting 128 gigabytes. And then of course, having microSD card expansion does then allow you to make the most of that internal space because you can always offload photos and videos, for example, onto that microSD card to then free up that space. Now, unfortunately, with this phone, there is no wireless charging, but we do get a fingerprint sensor on the power button. So let's give that a try right now. And you can see that's very fast and responsive. Let's try that one more time. So that works really well there. And then in addition to that, we're also getting face unlock with the phone. Now taking a look at the back of the device, we are getting a triple camera setup. So we're getting a 50-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel macro camera for close-up images, and then we're also getting a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera to assist with portrait mode. So over here in the camera app, you can see we're not getting a ton of different options. For example, no ultra-wide angle camera, which is a bit unfortunate, but that is a feature we have with the Pro version of this device. Now heading over to the More tab here, you can actually go over to 50M to activate the full 50 megapixels because that's not actually enabled by default. And the reason for that is because 50 megapixel images typically take up a lot more space on the device, and a lot of people just don't need that day to day. But you can see when capturing photos in 50 megapixels, things do look really good here, nice and crisp and clear, that's for sure. So certainly we're not getting necessarily bad cameras here with this device. Now also in the More tab, we have the macro camera, so you can get very close up and have things be in really good detail. So overall, even though this is my first impressions, I'm actually pretty confident about the cameras that we have here on the phone. Now, if you are looking for portrait mode, here it's called live focus. So if you go there, you can adjust the level of blur, and then of course you do get those blurred out backgrounds. One unfortunate thing though is that there is no portrait mode for the front-facing camera. So you can see you can take selfies, of course, because the front camera is there, but as soon as you tap on live focus, it then switches things back to the rear camera. So I really don't understand why both this device and the Pro don't have the ability to capture portrait selfies, but it's certainly one of the few phones out there that lacks that feature. And then video recording is kind of strange here because it does max out at 2K for the rear camera. So there is of course 1080p as an option as well, but there is no true 4K video recording. But honestly, if you compare this phone to pretty much anything else in its segment, and especially considering if you can get this phone for free, it's really hard to really have any complaints when it comes to the cameras here with the device because, at least for what we're getting, we are getting some really nice camera features. So it's not like we're getting low quality cameras, and you can't expect to get every single feature out there with a phone in this segment. Now internally with this device, we're getting 6GB of RAM paired up with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor. Now that's actually a really good processor to be getting with a phone in this segment. Things run really fast and smooth. It's actually the same processor that's in the Pro model of this device. So if you are looking for a phone that's very affordable yet performs very well, this might be one of your best options out there. So I'm just really impressed that we even got this processor here with this device. Now I did run a benchmark test here using Geekbench 6, and I'll show you the scores from that test. But essentially, I got a single core score of 929 and a multi-core score of 2738. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to see how the T-Mobile Revvl 7 5G compares. But actually, the single core score here is even a bit higher than the Pro model, so that's kind of surprising. I wasn't expecting that, but in general, the Pro and the regular here are very similar, honestly, in performance. I think one of the reasons maybe why this phone performs a bit better is because the display is a little bit lower quality, and in general, it doesn't have to push as much around, so it does take a bit of a load off the actual processor itself, and in return for that, I suppose, it is giving us better benchmark scores. Now with this device, we are getting a very large 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery, so definitely expect to get very good battery life out of this phone, thanks to it having such a generous amount of battery capacity, and then it is compatible with up to 15 watt fast charging. Now keep in mind though that if you actually want 15 watts, you are going to have to use a 15 watt fast charger, and that is not included here in the box. So this phone does have a very large battery at 5,000 milliamp hours, and you're definitely going to want to use as fast of a charger as possible so you're not sitting around all day waiting for this phone to recharge. So if it does seem like the phone is charging a bit slower than what you're expecting, that's because you're using a very low end, probably 5 watt wall adapter. You need to be using a 15 watt wall adapter to get those faster charging speeds. And then the software here is Android 14, pretty much a stock version of the software, which for many people is probably totally fine. We're getting NFC as well with this phone, so you can use it for tap and pay. And then a nice bonus too with this device is that we're actually getting stereo speakers. So we're getting both audio out of the main speaker in the bottom, but also the earpiece as well when listening to music or watching video content. And that's especially something that you don't find with phones in this segment. But taking a closer look at the hardware of this device, I already talked quite a bit about the front panel here, but we are getting a pretty large bottom bezel there and pretty big bezels in general in addition to that notch up top. But again, for a phone in this segment, I really can't complain about too much. On the left side here, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. On the right side, we have volume up, volume down, and also the power button, which doubles as the fingerprint sensor. And then up top here, we have the noise canceling microphone. Then on the bottom of the phone, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and we have the speaker. And then on the back of the device, we have the triple camera setup, flash, T-Mobile logo, and that's pretty much it. And also, by the way, I really like this matte finish on the back of the phone. I also like the silver appearance as well. I think it looks really nice. And overall, it really doesn't pick up too many fingerprints. So in general, I think they made a great choice when kind of deciding on the materials and design of this smartphone. But this concludes my hands-on and first impressions video of the T-Mobile Revvl 7 5G. Overall, I'm very impressed with this device. I think it has a lot going for it, and I'm certainly looking forward to spending a lot more time with it in preparation for my full review video. But if you liked the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. This is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.